What fire strategy is right for you? Is it lean fire, traditional fire, fat fire, or coast fire, or how about a chubby fire? And I understand that every one of you has a unique financial situation. You may be someone who is in debt that you're desperately trying to get out of. You may be someone who just started to invest and you're trying to get to know the best way to maximize your investments. You may be someone who's been investing for a while and you're contemplating for early retirement, but you're not sure which strategy is the right one for you. And you may be wondering if this financial independence movement is right for you at all. And there are many Americans who aren't even aware of the financial independence movement simply because they were never taught about investing at school or at their jobs. When I was a kid, I was taught to work hard, take out a mortgage, and collect Social Security in my 60s. I was taught nothing about how to save or invest, but just to work until I could collect my Social Security retirement. And let me ask you this: how much were you taught about filing your taxes when you were in high school? Did your parents ever teach you how to budget or pay your bills? At your job, how often does your employer give you training about your 401k? Did you ever learn about the power of compound interest before watching this video? Now, don't get me wrong, I have no problems with people working when they're retired. But the purpose of the FIRE movement is that people should work only because they want to, not because they need to. There are millions of Americans who are not even on track to retire on time. So why am I even talking about the FIRE movement? Because understanding the concept of FIRE will open up many doors for you and the generations after you. I'm going to continue to work going into my 40s, 50s, and 60s to have my financial consultation business to help people get out of debt, budget, and invest in their future. But I'm not going to do it because I need to do it. I'm going to do it because I want to do it. And my mentality with the FIRE movement is not to focus on my early retirement, but to focus on the financial independence piece so that I have the option to retire at any time. So financial independence is what we focus on so that we have the possibility to retire early. And whether you are doing FIRE or not, every one of you is trying to achieve some type of financial independence so that you don't have to rely on your 9 to 5 job for the rest of your life. The concept of FIRE is to save, invest, and aggressively invest now so that you have the possibility to retire early in your 30s, 40s, or even 50s. And FIRE followers cut their expenses to the minimum so that they can increase their savings rate. Maybe you're not the type of person who wants to cut expenses because you enjoy living in the now. But ask yourself this question: if you can invest at least 25% of your investment in your retirement account, and can you do it intentionally with the 25% and then increase your savings rate by increasing your income? Your savings rate and time are what matters the most. Can you save and invest 50% of your income now so that you don't need to save as much as you get closer to FIRE? If you quit your job today, would you be able to use your investments to pay for your living expenses? If the answer is yes, then you are financially independent. If the answer is no, you still have steps you need to take in order to get there. And let me give you an example of a traditional FIRE. If you think you're going to spend $75,000 a year on your retirement budget, then you're going to need at least $1.875 million, because that's $1.875 million invested by multiplying 75,000 by 25. You also need to keep inflation adjustments in mind, because is this going to be the dollars now or dollars in the future? So for example, if you have $1.875 million invested, then your 4% withdrawal rate would be $75,000 a year, right? Because if you multiply 1.875 million by 4%, it would be 75,000. Something else you need to consider is your bear market fund. Is what happens if you retire but your portfolio declines by 20%. People in the FIRE movement strive to save at least 2 years of their expenses in cash or cash equivalent assets just for this bear market scenario. If you're a high net worth individual with a $5 or $5.5 million investment portfolio, then you might need 3 years of your expenses set aside. And the bear market year, like in 2022, would have been the perfect year to use cash to pay for your retirement expenses. When the stock market recovered in 2023 by gaining a 26% return, then that's when you live on your investments again and sell some more to replenish your cash savings. And being financially independent is a subjective term. your FIRE lifestyle is not going to be the same as mine, your neighbors, or anyone else's. How you want to retire is not going to be the same as my retirement lifestyle. Here's some questions you can ask yourself to decide your FIRE strategy. One, when or where do you want to retire? Are you looking to retire somewhere close to your family? Are you looking to retire in the city, town, or somewhere even more remote? Two, what are your day-to-day expenses going to be? Are you the type of person who wants to eat out every single day or every single night? Or are you the type of person who wants to travel every month, every quarter, or every year? How much do you think it'll cost you at the baseline for your expenses? And three, do you want to work a part-time or full-time job when you reach your FIRE number? Are you going to have other income sources like businesses, real estate, social security, dividends, or pensions? Four, do you have a bucket list or hobby in mind when you retire? I'm personally looking to travel to every NFL stadium in the US when I retire. And my wife wants to see every waterfall on our planet. And five, do you or someone in your family have a chronic health condition that's going to require you to pay more on out-of-pocket healthcare expenses? Because you have to remember that you're not going to be eligible for Medicare until you're 65. So you'll need to budget for these healthcare expenses, expected or unexpected, if you're looking to retire earlier than 65 years old. And the next thing you'll need to do is to create a mock retirement budget. If you think millionaires don't budget at all, you're wrong. If you don't budget, you will never have any idea how much you'll spend or save. But if you're thinking about your early retirement, here are some things that you can get started with. And first, how much is it going to cost to keep a roof over your head? Are you going to have a balance on your mortgage, or are you going to have your house paid off by the time you're retired? Second, how much is it going to cost to keep utilities running in your house, like your phone, internet, cable, water, trash, sewer, electricity, and gas? And third, how much is it going to cost to buy your groceries each month? And how much do you plan to eat out? Fourth, how much is it going to cost to pay for your transportation? You shouldn't have a car payment. So the only thing you should have is car maintenance and DMV registration, right? How much is it going to cost to pay for your health insurance, homeowners insurance, and medical insurance? If you're a high net worth individual, then you might need to consider umbrella insurance as well. And six, how much do you plan to spend on entertainment every year? This is where you need to calculate how much you spend on anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, and other things that you want to buy every single year. Once you have a baseline budget figured out, you should be able to use your current annual expenses to project your retirement budget. As you get closer to your retirement age, you should be able to calculate your total retirement budget, but just remember to adjust it for inflation every single year. And the next step is to get rid of your debt. No one on the FIRE journey will ever say that getting a car loan or getting a credit card debt is a good idea to achieve FIRE. I once had almost $110,000 in consumer debt, and I couldn't start my FIRE journey until I had my debt completely paid off. But it is important to get out of debt as soon as possible so that you can increase your savings rate to achieve financial independence. Do not hold on to your debts unless it's a mortgage debt or something else that's appreciating in value every year. And the next step is to get a handle on your investments. You need to understand your investment timeline. So first, you need to understand the types of investment vehicles you currently have. Your long-term investment vehicles are with your 401k, Roth IRA, and HSA. Your intermediate investment vehicles could be with your taxable brokerage accounts. You need to know how they operate and the tax advantages that come with retirement accounts. Second, you need to know or understand what you're investing before you start investing. If I tell you I'm investing in VOO, I can tell you that it's a Vanguard S&P 500 ETF that tracks the performances of the S&P 500 index with the 500 largest US companies like Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Meta, Berkshire Hathaway, right? And I can't tell you how it's going to perform in the future, but I am comfortable with having my money invested in index funds. And this is not in any form of financial advice. The point of me telling you all this is that you need to be able to describe the investment and have a clear understanding before you put any money into it. Third, you need to know how much you're paying in management fees, maintenance fees, and any other hidden fees with your investment vehicles. You could be paying 2% in total fees annually while your investment performs 8% annually. Your net return for that investment would just be 6%. That doesn't even account for your annual inflation rate. And fourth, you need to know if your investments can handle a 4% distribution rate. If your fund performs 7% annually with a 4% withdrawal rate, your investment portfolio will perform 3% in net return. You have to make sure that your investment does not run out of money throughout your retirement. The best case scenario is that you don't just rely on the stock market to retire early, but you should diversify your assets with both tangible and intangible assets like real estate, businesses, and royalties. And lastly, you should know the rules for your 401k, Roth IRA, HSA, or other tax shelter investment accounts. Each account comes with its own rules, characteristics, eligibility, and benefits. And the next step is to be flexible with your FIRE plan, but you have to stick to your investment plan. Some things that are gonna change is your expenses. Your FIRE expenses could either go up or down every year, and it's gonna depend on your situation. Let me give you some examples. If you're looking to retire after your kids move out of the house, then your expenses will most likely decrease from tuition, books, food, and your general cost of living. You could have unexpected healthcare or health problems that might require you to pay for prescription medications out of pocket. Or you could have your spouse or other immediate family members who require consistent medical attention due to chronic conditions. And you might be looking to increase your quality of life now, which could carry over into your retirement. And the bottom line is that you need to pay attention to your current budget and your spending habits, because your expenses will change your FIRE number on an annual basis. You have to account for inflation when you calculate your FIRE number, even if your spending habits don't change, right? And your cell phone bill this year might be $70 a month, but next year it might become $75 a month. What do you think it'll be 10 to 20 years from now? I have been following my financial independence checklist since 2014, and I can only hope that you do the same. And once you have your budget figured out, these are the steps you want to take to get started on your financial independence journey. No matter what type of FIRE you want to achieve, you have to calculate your FIRE number. If your expenses will be $100,000 a year, then it's 100,000 multiplied by 25. And that's how much you need to have invested at the bare minimum to achieve FIRE. You also need to multiply by 2 to have the cash or cash equivalent assets set aside in case of a bear market. And the next step is to make sure to have a rainy day fund, but only up to the total deductibles you have for your insurance. If I ever get in a car accident, that's $500 in deductible. If I ever go to an ER for any medical reasons, that's another $500 in deductible. If my house experiences any damages, that could be another $1,000 in deductible. And you could be someone who just needs $1,000 set aside, or you may need $2,000 because you have a pre-existing health condition or a dependent who relies on you. Remember that if you ever need to use your rainy day fund, you have to pause everything else until you're fully replenish it. And what you don't want to do is to put too much into your rainy day fund if you're still in debt. It should just be a little cushion, right? And the next step is to contribute to your retirement like your 401k, but only up to the employer match. You should never leave free money on the table. If your employer gives you a 5% contribution, if you contribute 5%, then 5% should be the bare minimum contribution under step 3. Because the next step is to pay off your high interest debt besides your mortgage as quickly as possible. I did this when I was on my debt-free journey between 2014 and 2016, when I paid off over $110,000 in consumer debt. And I can tell you that it was such a huge weight off my shoulders. And there was no way that I could have gone to steps 5, 6, or 7 if I still had my debt. And I spent 2 years paying off my debt. And because of the sacrifice I made in step 4, I was able to proceed to step 5. If you can't make the sacrifice to get out of consumer debt, like your credit cards, personal loans, 401k loan, or car loans, you're never going to be able to achieve financial independence. And I'm not trying to discourage you, because it's just a fact. It's a simple math problem. After I paid off my debt in 2016, I spent another 6 months piling up my cash reserve, but only to my emergency fund. This is more than what I did in step 2, because step 2 was just to cover my insurance deductibles in case of a short-term emergency. But step 5 is where you create a cushion between you and the floor, right? And think of your emergency fund as a mattress between you and the floor, because that thick mattress is going to prevent you from getting back into debt again or going back to step 4. You should not invest for retirement until you have your cash reserve, because then your money's all going to be tied up in your retirement account, right? I combine my emergency fund and my rainy day fund for the purpose of covering my loss of income due to unemployment, injuries, or long-term care. If there's a family emergency that requires me to buy a plane ticket within 24 hours to visit them, then I could use my emergency fund to buy an expensive last-minute plane ticket to see someone. The bottom line is that Step 5 is preventing me from getting back into debt again. You have to be patient and get this step done. And the basic rule of thumb is that if you're in a dual income household where your spouse can cover the expenses while you're unemployed, they have a minimum of 3 months of expenses set aside in your emergency fund. However, if you're in a single income household, then you should save at least 6 months of your expenses. Don't keep your entertainment fund, travel fund, and emergency fund combined. They need to be completely separate from one another. You can check out the separate video I did on the cash reserve strategy. After maxing out the emergency fund, the next step is to max out your Roth IRA and HSA. If you don't have an HSA, then just do the Roth IRA. And step 7 is where you max out your 401k contribution up to the IRS limit. The same rule applies if you have a 403b or TSP. If you can't just get there yet, then just try contributing up to the maximum until you reach a 25% savings rate between HSA, Roth IRA, and 401k. If you can't make it to 25%, then you're going to have to increase your income or lower your discretionary expenses. And step number 8 is to achieve a 50% savings rate. And let me give you some examples or scenarios with $100,000 in gross income. If you're single and under 50, you are maxing out your IRA, HSA, and 401k. That's already 30% of your income towards retirement. You will still have an additional 20% to save, and that can be towards your taxable brokerage account. And if you're married and you are the sole provider for the household, maxing out your IRA, your spouse's IRA, HSA, and 401k will put you in the 40% savings rate just for your retirement. That's going to be too much going into your retirement if your household income is only $100,000. So I would actually go back to step 7 and hold off on maxing out the employer retirement plan until your income goes up. What you don't want to do is tie up all of your money in retirement, because then you don't have a lot of room to save for other expenses that you need. If your household income is $200,000 a year, then that puts you in the 20% retirement savings rate. And remember that your goal is to save as much money as possible to retire early, but don't tie up all of your money in the retirement accounts that you don't have immediate access to. If you don't make enough to complete step 7, then just increase your retirement savings rate to 25%. And step 9 is to build generational wealth. This is where you should think about creating a trust, investing in real estate, the 529, UTMA, UGMA, or other investment assets you can pass down to your children or grandchildren. Even if you don't have any kids or don't plan to have any kids, you need to start thinking about how to protect your assets. Your net worth might already be exceeding around $500,000 at this point. And the final step is to pay off your mortgage. The beauty of owning a home is that your house will build equity over time. So your 15 or 30-year mortgage payments will eventually become cheaper over time as well with inflation. You won't have to worry about the rising cost of rent if you already own a home. You don't have to wait until step 10 to pay off your mortgage. When my wife and I turn 50 years old, our goal is to not owe any mortgage for our primary home. That's because at the age of 50, we want to be more risk averse when it comes to debt. While we're in our 30s and 40s, we want to slowly pay down the mortgage while we invest the rest into the stock market. There's also nothing wrong with paying off the mortgage early. And I would just make sure that you have at least completed steps 1 to 7, and steps 8, 9, and 10 can be done in any order or at the same time. And there is nothing wrong with paying off your mortgage early in your 30s or 40s. I'm not against it at all. I know someone who paid off his mortgage at the age of 30 and he doesn't regret it one bit. The only expenses I want to worry about are the property tax and homeowner's insurance. The generational wealth I want to pass down is my real estate 529 college savings plan, retirement plan, and most importantly, financial education to my kids and eventually grandkids maybe. And I don't want to give them millions of dollars in wealth when I die without properly educating them on wealth management. It's like getting $100 million from a lottery ticket without having any financial knowledge. Before the FIRE concept became a movement, Trinity University in 1998 did an extensive study on the investment withdrawal strategy, also known as the Trinity study. It is also known as the source of the 4% withdrawal rule. But you have to remember that these studies are done based on historical performances. No one knows how the stock market will perform tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year. But we do use the historical data to make sure the portfolio lasts until the end of our time. And this was the last or the original Trinity study from 1998, accomplished by Philip Cooley, Carl Hubbard, and Daniel Waltz. This document is also available on my website, so you can read it at any time. You're probably wondering why you should even care about what happened between 1926 and 1997. Well, you have to understand that the market doesn't always go up, and sometimes the market can stay down for many years. The bear market years I saw was the dot-com bubble and the global recession in 2008. As you can see, they had a 100% success rate in making the portfolio last with a 3% withdrawal rate with 100% allocation in stocks. And keep in mind that this is after going through a Great Depression in the 1930s, World War II, and high inflation in the 1970s and early 1980s. The high financial market returns in the 1980s and 1990s allowed the portfolio to achieve at least a 75% success rate. A withdrawal rate of 8% was actually successful if the investor maintains a portfolio of at least 50% stocks. This data is also based on the monthly withdrawals. And if you go to the PDF of the study, it'll show you a table with the success rate with inflation adjusted withdrawal rate. Okay. And you also have to keep in mind that some of the allocation strategy was to use the 60-30-10, which was 60% stocks, 30% bonds, and 10% treasury bills from 1926 to 1997. They also have another table showing success rate from 1946 to 1997, which excludes the Great Depression and World War II. And there are several published and updated Trinity studies from several wealth management companies. And RBC Wealth Management published a guideline to help people understand the recent success rate. And I'm actually doing one of my own every year. And it's important to stress test your portfolio at least once a year to create a mock retirement budget. Remember, you have to recalculate your FIRE number at least once a year to make sure that you're on track. But anyway, you still have to remember that these are success rates based on historical returns. They use the S&P 500 index and government bonds for the allocation. This is different from the original Trinity study, and it shows the 40-year retirement horizon. And remember, we are living a lot longer than our previous generations. When I look at my financial planning, I want my portfolios to last 40 to 50 years. But again, none of the data I just showed you can guarantee future success. Before you figure out how much you should withdraw from your investment portfolio, you need to first calculate how much pension income you're going to collect. That's the taxable income. So you want to prioritize how much you'll get that first. Do you plan to get qualified dividend income or capital gains? Because these are taxed at 0, 15, or 20% in a different tax bracket if you meet the long-term thresholds. And are you going to have real estate or some type of disability income? If you've ever served in the military, you might be collecting some type of tax-free VA disability income. So if you have $30,000 a year in pension income and another $30,000 a year in real estate income, and you just need $40,000 a year from your $2 million investment portfolio, and that's going to be a 2% withdrawal rate, right? And I strongly recommend that you don't just rely on one investment vehicle. And this is why I have multiple investment vehicles with different characteristics. Some of them are in after-tax contributions, and some of them are in Roth. You also have to pay attention to how the market performs every year, because you're assuming that you're not making any additional contributions during your retirement. So if you go through a tough time in the market, do you have enough cash set aside to weather the storm? I will go over how to overcome a bear market in a separate video. Let me show you the 8 levels of financial independence. You may find different versions from other sources, but this is what I've been following for many years. Course members can download this free PDF. So you'll have to first figure out your FIRE number based on your annual expenses. You can put the numbers there. Then you should write down how much you have invested so far to achieve financial independence. Your emergency fund will be about 2 years of your annual expenses. You're going to write it down here too. And level 1 is to become completely debt-free, except for your mortgage. Getting to the first level was difficult for me to do when I had over $110,000 in total consumer debt. If you have any credit cards, student loans, car loans, or 401k loans, you need to pay those off as soon as possible. And level 2 is when you have your cash reserve built to make sure you don't get back into debt again. I always recommend having at least 5 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account and 1 month of expenses in your primary checking account. And level 3 is when you achieve your first milestone by investing $100,000. Getting from level 2 to level 3 is quite difficult if your savings rate is low. But once you get to your first $100,000, your number will grow exponentially. This is why you want to pour everything you can to get to your first $100,000. And level 4 is poverty fire. And I know it sounds so weird to be retired at the poverty line, but this is actually the income level based on the Census Bureau's poverty line. So when the poverty income was $15,000 per person in the year 2024, if you multiply that by 25, that's going to be $375,000. By getting to $375,000 in investments is actually a milestone. We just happen to call it poverty fire because it's at the poverty line. And level 5 is lean fire, and that's not an easy milestone to achieve. If you double the poverty fire number, you're going to be at the lean fire number. If you're a couple, I recommend adding about a third of that to the fire number. And people on lean fire can typically retire early at the 25% income percentile based on the income levels in the US household just by inflation every year. They practice frugality and minimalism throughout their journey. And level 6 is fire, or some people call it the traditional fire. If you double the lean fire number, generally speaking, that's gotta be your traditional fire number per individual. And level 7 is chubby fire. If you double the traditional fire number, you'll get to the chubby fire number. Chubby fire usually puts you in the 80th percentile and puts you in the semi-luxurious fire lifestyle. And level 8 is fat fire. If you double the chubby fire number, you'll get the fat fire number. This is when you're truly enjoying the luxurious lifestyle without really worrying about running out of money. And I always teach that your fire investment should be your annual expenses multiplied by 25. Should also have 2 years of cash reserves set aside in case of a stock market crash or a long-term recession. And course members, don't forget to download this free PDF. And I'd like to know what type of fire you would like to achieve. By the way, I am so fired up to announce the launch of my private fire community for people just like you and me who are passionate about investing, saving, and achieving financial independence and exploring different possibilities to retire early. My private community will allow you to connect with me on the platform and get in touch with other like-minded individuals or couples who are just as serious as you are with the FIRE movement. As a member of my private community, you'll get resources like investing, saving, paying off debt, or finding the right place to grow your money. Let me show you the most important retirement calculator that you'll need to use to figure out how much you need to save each month and each year to either retire early or retire on time. You should recalculate your FIRE number at the end of the calendar year or at the beginning of next year. And keep in mind that this is a very, very generic calculator. Every private client gets a personalized calculator. So if you want one, you can schedule a one-on-one session with me. And this is a simple one-on-one sheet financial independence calculator to figure out how much you need to invest every month to achieve financial independence and potentially retire early. The first block here is where you're going to enter your birthday. And I just put a notional one with September 1st, 1990. Once you put the birthday in there, the spreadsheet automatically calculates how old you are. So if you were born in 1990, the spreadsheet will show that you are going to be 34 years old based on today's date. As you can see on the next block, today's date is also automatically calculated. In the next block is where you enter your desired retirement age. This is a very important step because the age you put in this block will calculate the rest of the spreadsheet. So if I put 60 here, it means that I can include my retirement accounts like a 401k, 403b, TSP, and Roth IRA in my calculation. If I put age 55, the calculator itself is not going to include my Roth IRA earnings and interest because I can't touch them until I'm at least 59 and a half, but I can include my 401k, 403b, or TSP. And the next block is where you enter your desired retirement age. So this is a very important step because the age you put in this block will help you calculate your desired retirement age for the rest of the spreadsheet. So if I put 60 here, it means that I can include my retirement accounts like a 401k, 403b, TSP, and Roth IRA in my calculation. But if I put 55 there, then it should not include my Roth IRA earnings and interest because I can't touch them until I'm at least 59 and a half. But I can include my 401k, 403b, or TSP if I'm looking to retire at the age of 55, so I can make withdrawals under the rule of 55. And if you look on the right side here, that's your current annual expenses. You need to keep in mind that about what you want to include in your annual expenses. Do you want to just include your essential expenses in here, like your housing, transportation, groceries, utilities, and insurance? Or do you also want to include your discretionary expenses? If you don't know how much you've spent so far this year, you can always put your desired retirement expenses here. Do not put your debt repayments in here because you should not be in any debt by the time you retire. So for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna leave it at $60,000. And the next block is where you estimate the average annual inflation rate. And this is a tough one to figure out because nobody knows how our inflation will be in the next 25 years. The average annual inflation rate in the US between 1914 and 2023 was 3.3%. The Federal Reserve is always aiming to maintain the inflation rate at 2%. So I just found something in the middle and call it a 2.5%. But if you look at the next two blocks here, my retirement year is 2050, right? And then my retirement annual expenses in the future will be $99,000 adjusted by inflation. And these blocks will change depending on what you input in the current annual expenses and your desired retirement age. And the next block is where you put your additional income sources you're going to have in your retirement. And keep in mind that these numbers are going to be estimated during your retirement. Dividend income, for example, is most likely going to come out of my taxable brokerage account. If I had $1 million invested with a 4% annual dividend yield, then that would be $40,000 a year. And a lot of people also have real estate properties going into their retirement. You should only put the net income in this block and not your gross income. You shouldn't include any real estate deductions, expenses, or taxes on this block, and only what comes into your bank account after everything is paid off. And the next common retirement income is Social Security. But keep in mind that you can't collect your Social Security pension until you're 62 years old at the minimum, age 67 for the full retirement pension, and age 70 for the maximum retirement pension. If you're going to retire at age 60, you should not put any Social Security retirement pension in this block. And it's going to be automatically blacked out if you put less than age 62 under the desired retirement age at the top. And you can visit ssa.gov and log into your Social Security account to find your retirement estimates. And the next one here is any other income sources, like your business income or royalty income. It could also be your military pension if you're someone who retired from active duty military, guard, or reserve. You might have additional pension income or stock options from your private sector employer that you need to account for. And all of these additional income sources will be taken into account when the spreadsheet calculates your FIRE number. So, for example, in this scenario, my annual expenses in the year 2050 are going to be $99,000. If I had $20,000 in net real estate income during my retirement year, then I really just need to account for a portion of the FIRE number because I'm using my real estate income to supplement my FIRE. So my FIRE number could be reduced significantly with my other income sources, right? And that makes sense so far. And on the right side here is where you put your current investment balances. The first block is where I enter the total Roth contributions and conversions that I made. And the second block is my total Roth earnings accrued from the Roth contributions and conversions. The third block is where I enter my 401k, 403b, TSP, or other employer-sponsored retirement plan. The fourth block is where I enter the balance of my traditional IRA. And the last block is where I enter the total amount I have invested in the non-retirement account, like the taxable brokerage account. And it's up to you what you want the average annual return to be. I put 8% to be conservative because it's the net return after the management expenses. Some people put 6% or 7% to be even more conservative. And some people put 9% or 10% because they feel more confident with their portfolio returns. So the final result here is going to show you that in today's dollars, it's $60,000 in annual expenses. You're going to need 1.5 million invested to be considered financially independent. The second block is going to be adjusted by inflation with 2.5% annually multiplied by 25 years. So my FIRE number will be 2.5 million or 2.475 million in future dollars adjusted by inflation. And if you don't understand the calculation, you can always reference the formula on the left-hand side right here, and where it says annual expenses multiplied by 25 equals investments. I'll also put annual expenses multiplied by 2 equals cash because that's how much cash you should have set aside at a minimum in case the stocks go through a bear market like we did in 2022. And some people might need to save at least 3 years of their expenses because they're pursuing chubby fire or fat fire. And this section is where you can reference the total emergency cash reserve needed for your retirement. And like I said earlier, some people start with 1 year, but I always recommend at least 24 months for early retirement. And if you're looking on the right side here, you can see that every time you make any updates to the desired retirement age, let's say you want to retire before 55, under 55, then you're not going to see anything in these blocks. These are going to be completely blacked out on their own. Okay. And if you want to retire between the age of 55 and 59, then these blocks will become unhidden. Right now they're hidden because at the top here I put desired retirement age as 60. All right. So right now, I want to retire at age 60. So I need to invest at least $31,000 a year for the next 25 years to have at least 2.4 million invested by the age 60. Okay. And if you're looking to retire earlier, then you're going to need to change your age at the top of the screen there. And again, every one of you watching this has a unique financial situation. And this is by far the most important calculator to calculate my fire number every single year. The key is to keep track of your annual expenses every year. My calculator can help you figure out the dollar amount adjusted by annual inflation. It can also help you determine if you're on track to either retire early or on time. Some of you might want to retire early by age 50 because you're a first responder, and some of you might want to retire early by age 55 using a 401k. And some of you just want to retire on time at age 59 and a half to live on IRAs on 401k, or age 62 when you start collecting Social Security. Now let's talk about lean fire. And the idea behind lean fire is to earn and invest enough to cover your basic expenses. This is generally for people living in a very frugal lifestyle, and their goal is to maintain those minimalistic habits going into their retirement. People on lean fire can typically retire early at the 25% income percentile based on the income levels in the US household adjusted by inflation every year. You can always look up the household income percentiles in the United States to find how it's adjusted by inflation annually. And just like any fire strategy, people on lean fire first figured out their fire number, but with an emphasis on frugality. The lean fire community is very unique because they focus on frugality and minimalism. The typical fire number is based on the location, but it could be anywhere between $750,000 and $1 million. And that's annual expenses of between $30,000 and $40,000 per year. And most lean fire people I've talked to will have their mortgages paid off by the time they retire early, but they do include their property taxes and insurance in their fire number. And they also have to include utilities to keep the house running, like electricity, gas, water, sewer, and trash. They also include the internet and subscription services to the fire number. They include groceries and some days they eat out, but they don't eat out as much as other fire people I know. They're extremely frugal when it comes to groceries and eating out. They have transportation included in their fire number, but it's really just gas money and basic vehicle maintenance because their vehicles will be completely paid off. They also have to account for any healthcare expenses when they're not employed. Health insurance without an employer is generally higher than those who are employed. And a typical lean fire living in the US will have the house paid off, but it really depends on each person's situation. There are lean fire people living abroad who don't need a lot to retire early. If you're not a frugal person already, but you're interested in pursuing lean fire, you're going to need to pick a location with a lower cost of living and significantly reduce your expenses. And that might be hard to find in the US. You might even need to consider paying off your mortgage before your early retirement to meet the goal of your lean fire number. And because of their minimalistic living, they may not even need to withdraw the basic 4% out of the entire portfolio. If you're choosing a lean fire lifestyle, your $1 million portfolio could come a long way if you're living somewhere that doesn't cost you more than 3% of your portfolio. You may not even have to adjust for inflation as much because of the low cost of living expenses. And you just have the portfolio grow year over year with the spread between the withdrawal and the portfolio growth. So let's take a look at the lean fire calculator. Let's say you're 25 years old and your lean fire number is $1 million. and you're looking to retire by the age of 45 using your taxable brokerage account. And assuming that the market performs a 7% average annual return, your savings rate will matter more than how the market performs. If you save 25% of your income, making $100,000 a year, you should have $750,000 in 16 years and $1 million in 21 years. If you can't do 25% right away, then start with 15% and then increase your savings rate by 2% annually or as much as you can. And let's say you hit the lean fire number at the age of 40 here. Let's use the fixed percentage withdrawal strategy at 4% right there. That's going to be about $30,000 a year in early retirement. And you can decrease your withdrawal rate initially by 3% or 3.5% to create that spread between your withdrawal rate and the portfolio growth. And people on lean fire are extremely careful with how much they withdraw because they focus on frugality and minimalism to make sure the portfolio doesn't run out of money. And maintaining that withdrawal rate at 4% will increase your early retirement income based on portfolio growth. If the portfolio does poorly in the market, then you could have a lower income coming in that year. Whether a lean fire is right for you or not will depend entirely on your current lifestyle expenses. Are you already frugal or practicing minimalism? Lean fire folks can get out of the rat race at the 25% income percentile, which means you're making more than a quarter of the households in the US without working. And just keep in mind that the data for the household income percentiles does not show the local cost of living or taxes. You have to calculate your own lean fire number based on where you want to live and your annual expenses. The other risk of doing a lean fire is if you ever go through a major life-changing event that creates higher annual expenses, could create a pressure on your investment portfolio. If our economy goes through a long-term recession, you'll have to make sure your lean fire portfolio does not run out of money. The idea behind Fat Fire is to have almost unlimited lifestyle options. And we call the strategy FAT because people on Fat Fire have higher retirement expenses than the average person or household. This is generally for people living a luxurious lifestyle with an investment portfolio of over $5.5 million or more. And their goal is to maintain the same high spending habits going into their retirement. Your net worth should be at a minimum of 8 figures. And getting to Fat Fire means that you are in the top 10% of households by income and getting that passively. How fat you want to go will be subjective, depending on the cost of living and lifestyle choices. If you retire early in the US at the bare minimum, your Fat Fire number should be starting at $220,000 a year or $5.5 million in your investment portfolio. These are based on the 2024 numbers. But if your current income is even higher than the 95th percentile or 99th percentile, then your income could be a lot higher to $300,000 or $600,000 per year. Your portfolio will need to be at least $7.5 million or $15 million if you're looking to invest or have at least $600,000 in passive income. Those numbers will go up annually with inflation, but these numbers are absolutely huge if you compare them to the average American household. And you're probably wondering, how the heck does an average American make $200,000 or more in income to have $5 or $10 million in investments? I'll be completely honest with you. It is not impossible, but it won't be easy for you to achieve Fat Fire if your income is less than $200,000 a year. You can achieve it, but you'll need to start early, like in your 20s or 30s, to invest at least $120,000 a year to get to $5.5 million in 20 years. And that's assuming your investment portfolio makes a 7% average annual return. But there are high-paying jobs like software engineers working at one of the major tech companies. I have met many software engineers who make $300,000, $400,000, or $500,000 a year, or a lawyer working at a major law firm. While these job sectors will give you a better opportunity to save over 6 figures annually into your investments, not everyone is willing to make the sacrifice now to save 50, 60, or 70% of their income. There are people who make over $200,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck because they have a high student loan balance, multiple vehicle loans, and credit card debt. No matter how much money you make, it always comes down to your behavior spending. People on Fat Fire don't take out debt that adds no value to their growth, but they are likely to take out debt that adds value or reduces tax liabilities. These people are extremely smart with their money because they focus on their long-term vision and find different ways to reduce their tax liabilities because taxes are always going to be an issue for high income earners. And there are also professional athletes who achieved a very high savings rate because they knew they weren't going to last forever in the sports industry. If you read the story about Rob Gronkowski, who was a start tight end for the New England Patriots and Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady for many, many years, he saved all of his NFL salaries for the first 8 seasons of his NFL career and just live off of endorsement deals. He still wears the same clothes from his college days and tries to live as frugally as possible. And these are the smart professional athletes who are thinking about their long-term plans. And I have no doubt that Gronk has already fat fired. And the most common fat fire people I have met are people who own a business or working as C-level executives. And some people have sold their small businesses or got acquired by a large cap company to get a buyout. The compensation package can be in the 7 or 8 figure range before taxes. And I've consulted with several CEOs with their companies making 8 figures in stock-based compensation. And I'm a small business owner and I have a higher potential of turning my business into a multi-million-dollar business if I run my company efficiently. I'll be a little bit biased here and say that if you want to achieve fat fire number, you need to consider starting a business, switching to a big tech job, or getting on the executive track. Your income absolutely matters because making $100,000 a year with a 50% savings rate is $50,000 a year, right? But making $300,000 a year and saving 70% of your income will get you to your fat fire numbers so much faster. And you're still going to be living on $100,000 a year instead of $300,000 a year, right? And that's the whole idea of fat fire. So again, fat fire is to maintain your fat lifestyle. And I'm talking about taking multiple vacations every year overseas. Not every fat fire person owns a private jet, but they do choose to fly first class. Every person has their own definition of what's considered luxury. I would never buy any brand name materials like clothes or jewelry, but I would absolutely purchase first class tickets for every international trip. They're also most likely to have multiple locations to retire to instead of just one location. They could have a primary home somewhere in the States and vacation homes somewhere else, maybe overseas. They may want to live somewhere that's considered a higher cost of living because they prefer to have instant access to the nearby businesses. I know some fat fire people who prefer to rent because they don't want to store their cash in a primary residence. You may find this very hard to believe, but many high income earners prioritize their investments over buying luxury homes initially. It depends entirely on where you want to live or where you want to retire to. And fat fire people do pay higher fees for healthcare to get the best healthcare available to them. Health is something that they do prioritize over anything else because how do you spend money if you're always sick, right? And fat fire with kids will most likely pay for private tuition expenses unless they're in a very good public school system, which is very rare in the States nowadays. And the one expense fat fire people pay very close attention to is taxes. If you're married, your household income in the top 10% could be as low as 24%. But if you're single, your marginal tax rate is already at 32%. When you're retired on your fat fire investments, there are ways to reduce your tax liabilities by taking out debt against their investments, like the securities-based lines of credit. Debt is not taxable in the eyes of the IRS, and fat fire people understand that using a mix of debt and capital gains can significantly reduce their tax liabilities, which is a topic for another video. So how much do you think you'll need to invest every year to achieve fat fire? So let's say you're 25 years old with a 7% average annual return. You're gonna need to invest at least $120,000 a year to have $5.7 million by the time you turn 45 years old, right around there, okay? So it's not gonna be easy to do if your income is less than $220,000 a year, right? But is it doable? Absolutely. But remember that your savings rate really matters the most. If you make $250,000 a year, try investing $120,000 to maybe $150,000 a year. That's a 50 to 60% savings rate. And some people get millions of dollars from selling their businesses or real estate. And this is when hyper accumulation really occurs, right? That's when it begins. And what if you get a $100,000 real estate deal, you sell it with equity, you put that immediately into the taxable brokerage account, and just imagine how fast that can grow for you. And it's not about saving 25% of your income anymore, but saving 50, 60, 70, or even 80% of your income to get to that fat fire number as quickly as you can. For people already on their fat fire journey, I don't have to explain any of this to them because they already understand how this works. If you're brand new to the fat fire concept, just know that it is possible for you to get to 5 million, 10 million, or even 20 million, but you have to be realistic about your current income. Can you switch jobs now to get to a higher income level? Can you start a business to potentially bring in an additional 6 or 7 figures in revenue? Your savings rate always matters, but your income will matter more in the fat fire concept. So what is coast fire? Coast fire is what's known as coasting to financial independence by aggressively front loading their investment contributions and then letting the investments work their magic in the market so that you can coast into your retirement. And keep in mind that this is not an early retirement strategy at all. So I rather call it a coast fi instead of coast fire. And I'll go over the pros and cons later on in this video. But first, let me show you how it works. You need to first figure out how much you're looking to spend when you reach your retirement age. Let's say you want to retire at the age of 55 and your annual expenses will be $60,000 a year. If you multiply 60,000 by 25, you're going to need at least 1.5 million invested by the time you turn 55. You're also going to need to have at least 2 years of expenses set aside in an emergency fund for your retirement. So that's an additional 120,000 for cash. So that's a total of 1.62 million for the fire number in this example. Okay. Second, you need to know what investment vehicles you can use for your coast fire number. The type of investment vehicles will also depend on your retirement age. If you want to be on coast fire and you're not looking to retire until 55 years old, then you can use your 401k, 403b, 457, or TSP to invest that 1.62 million under the rule of 55. If you're not looking to retire until you're 60 years old, then you could include both your 401k and Roth IRA for your 1.62 million coast-fi strategy or calculation. But if you're looking to retire before the age of 55, then you should only use a taxable brokerage account for the 1.62 million coast-fire because you're not going to be eligible to withdraw from your 401k or Roth IRA just yet. So let's take a look at the coast-fire calculator. Let's say your coast-fire number is 1.62 million at age 25 years old, right? And you're looking to retire by the age of 55. We'll just go with that. Now I'm going to do the 7% average annual return, which is at a very conservative level. If you're not doing coast fire and you just want to invest on a regular basis, you would need to invest at least $15,000 a year from the age of 25 to the age of 55 to have $1.6 million. And that's assuming that your savings rate remains the same at $15,000 a year for 30 years with a 7% average annual return. But the idea of coast fire is to actually front load your investment contributions at the beginning so that you can reduce your savings rate in the last half of your coast fire journey. So instead of $15,000 a year, let's change that to $1,800 a month or $21,600 a year. And then you just stop contributing after you turn 40 years old or 15 years into your journey. So starting at the age of 41, you're just not going to put anything into the stock market just to have your stock market carry your investments to 1.6 million here by the time you turn 55 years old. So this works out great if you have a long time horizon because time is on your side, right? Your numbers could be much higher if your time horizon is narrower or your retirement age is much sooner than 55 years old. You'll have to play with the numbers and see where you are with your financial journey. So in this scenario, your coast fi target number is age 40 at $644,000 so that you can coast into your retirement to 1.6 million by the time you turn 55 years old. So let me go over the pros and cons of doing the coast fi strategy. First, the idea behind coast fi is to invest a large sum of money as quickly as possible so that your money will grow over time. It is actually extremely easy to calculate compared to the other fire strategies. At a certain point in time, you can theoretically stop investing and let the portfolio grow itself. And two, if you're in your 20s or early 30s, you have more time on your side to invest less amount to hit your coast fi number. And three, Once you reach your coast-fi number, you have the choice to stop contributing or contribute less than what you did. You get to have more money to keep to yourself to enjoy your life by buying things that you want. The idea of coast-fi is to work hard to invest more now so that you can enjoy spending money later on while you're still working. And by the time you're 60 years old, you should have more than enough to live on your investments if you're being very careful about your allocation and withdrawal strategies. And four, reaching coast-fi might give you the confidence to consider another career or start a business because you have achieved financial independence early. You won't worry as much about leaving a high paying job when you have the investments to have your back. If you continue to stay with your current job, then you're going to have continued access to healthcare, which will save you a lot of money, right? But there are significant downsides to doing the coast 5 strategy. First, you or anyone else cannot predict how the stock market will perform in the next 30 years. Your future returns are never guaranteed. So you're just counting on the interest and earnings to grow your investments if you're close to hitting your coast 5 number. And the market goes through a long term recession, then you might need to invest longer and much more to hit your fire number. You might even have to delay your retirement because the market didn't perform as well as the example of 7% I showed you earlier. And two, you're going to need to invest significantly more in your early days to hit your coast 5 number. This is generally for people who have higher incomes and lower expenses initially. You have to figure out how much you need to invest annually in order to hit that fire number. If you make less than $70,000 a year, then it might be pretty difficult to achieve unless your expenses are less than 50% of your gross income. And three, if you are looking to retire before the age of 55, you're going to need to invest significantly more in the taxable brokerage account, which could prevent you from maximizing your retirement contributions like the 401k or Roth IRA. If you don't earn a significant amount of income every year, that's going to be an issue, right? And not making enough contributions to your 401k or Roth IRA could put you in a higher tax bracket during your retirement. If you fail to reach your coast 5 number due to economic downturns and market fluctuations, you could end up regretting skipping out on your 401k and Roth IRA contributions. And these are the investment vehicles I always recommend maxing out if you want to have some kind of a backup plan going into your 60s if you fail to achieve fire. And not to mention skipping out on the market dips after you reach your coast 5 number, it could be devastating. And the stock market will always go up and down at any given time. If you completely stopped your contributions because you believe you hit your coast 5 number, you might be missing out on a significant discount on the stock market if you elect to stop all contributions. And what if the stock market just remains flat for the next 10 years? That could be a lost decade that we don't know about. So that's something that you want to think about and the risks before you start doing the coast 5 strategy. So just remember that coast 5 is not an early retirement strategy. If you like the coast 5 concept, you first need to know how much you need to invest every year to hit your coast 5 number. Second, you need to know at what age you're looking to retire. You also need to know your annual expenses for your retirement budget. You also need to adjust by inflation every year from now until your retirement age. Your 1.6 million today is not going to be the same as 1.6 million 30 years from now. Make sure to understand the risks that you're taking by solely relying on the stock market performances. What would you do if we go through a severe and long-term recession like we did in 2000 and 2008, or a lost decade? It is important to stress test your portfolio at least once a year. So what do you think is better? Investing $500 a month, making 10% return, or investing $1,000 a month, making a 7% return on investment? You can't figure out how much you can invest without a budget. There's no way around it. I personally tested out the budgeting app called YNAB, and it's not just an app that can track your income and expenses, but it can even help you create a plan to pay down your student loans, car loans, personal loans, or credit cards a lot faster. So if you're ready to change your life by getting out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle, you can get a free trial without any credit card information by using the link in the description below. So how often should you withdraw from your taxable investment portfolio? We talk about the 4% withdrawal rule a lot, but what is the frequency you should really do it? Even if you're not anywhere close to your retirement age, this lesson can help you understand how you can live on your investment portfolio without working on a 9-to-5 job. And remember, taxes from these portfolio distributions will matter a lot in your financial planning process. So let's talk about the market-based approach on your investment distributions. Determining a safe withdrawal rate in retirement is extremely difficult since you have no idea how long you'll live and how well or how bad the market will perform in the following year. So let's say I retired in December 2014 with 100% stock allocation in my $1 million portfolio, knowing that the market returned 11% by the end of 2014. I could make a one-time 4% withdrawal of $40,000 in January 2015. If $40,000 came out of my taxable brokerage account, then it would be tax-free with a 0% capital gains tax rate. If I withdrew it from my 401k, then it would be in the 12% marginal tax rate. If it came from my Roth IRA, then it would be completely tax-free. You have to be very aware of your tax implications for making distributions from every investment vehicle. And by the end of 2015, the market finished with a negative 1%. And I may not feel as safe with the market uncertainty. So I decided to take a 2% withdrawal rate instead of 4%. The rest of the 2% came from other sources of income or cash. And by the end of 2016, the S&P 500 finished with a 10% return. What I could do is sell 5% and use 1% of that to replenish the cash that I used to pay for my retirement expenses in the previous year. It's easy to look back at the stock market from years ago, but you have to realize how difficult it is to look forward when you have no idea how the market will perform in the following year. And in 2017, the S&P 500 finished with a 20% return. I could withdraw 5, 6, or 7% or even higher because the spread is wider in 2017, right? That extra 15% in the spread could make your investment portfolio last even longer if there's no market crash or a recession in the near future. You also have to adjust your distributions based on inflation, so you'll need to keep that in mind. You can also do what's called a fixed monthly withdrawal from your investment portfolio. It is exactly what it sounds like. So, if you have $1 million in your traditional 401k, your 3% withdrawal rate would be $2,500 a month before taxes, $3,333 a month with the 4% withdrawal rate, and $4,167 a month with a 5% withdrawal rate. And again, keep in mind that these are all pre-tax income if they come from your traditional 401k. Your broker should also ask you how much taxes to withhold on the side. So when they send you an IRS form 1099-R in February of the following year, then you shouldn't have to pay any taxes for the 401k withdrawals unless you have some additional income. If you're getting Social Security or other pension income, then you need to make sure that to set aside additional taxes by calculating your total effective tax rate. You don't want to be penalized by the IRS for under withholding your federal income tax. And if you need to make additional tax payments, be sure to check out when the quarterly tax payments are due. If you have additional income sources like the capital gains from the taxable brokerage account, then you need to make these tax payments before the due date. If you're living on Roth, then you don't need to worry about any tax payments at all because that's all tax-free income from your Roth IRA or Roth 401k. And the other method is to split withdrawals to keep your taxes low. This is probably more applicable if you plan to take distributions from your traditional 401k, 403b, or TSP. So theoretically speaking, let's say you want to withdraw $120,000 from your traditional 401k. Instead of taking a lump sum distribution, you could split it in two payments in year one and then take another $60,000 in year two, because doing that would keep you in the 12% marginal tax rate, assuming that you're single when you're retired. If you're married and filing your taxes jointly, then your marginal tax rate is 12%, as long as you're under $120,000 in total distributions in 1 year. So you have a bigger tax advantage if you're married. If you're single, then maybe doing the split payments is the right approach for you. So if I had to pick a priority order in which bucket I want to withdraw first, I would pick my traditional or pre-tax account first because I want to avoid RMDs or required minimum distributions as much as possible when I'm in my 70s. The next bucket will be my taxable account because it's taxed at 0, 15, or 20% in long-term capital gains tax rates. The last bucket I'll touch is my Roth accounts because I want my tax-free money to grow as much as possible and as long as possible. So what should you do if you're retired and you experience a severe recession like we did in 2000, 2008, and 2022? Well, 2022 was not a severe recession, but it was a recession nonetheless. And I want to go over the 3 withdrawal strategies during your retirement as well as their pros and cons. So if you plan to retire earlier than age 55, then I recommend that you have at least 2 years of expenses set aside in cash or cash equivalent assets. This is the cash you should not have invested in the market because it's your insurance plan when you go through a bear market scenario. Why age 55? That's because if you plan to retire at age 55, you will also have access to your 401k. If you retire before 55, then you have to wait until 59 and a half to access to your 401k. And I talked about that in a video about the rule of 55. Then you might not need to have all 2 years, but maybe 1.5 years if you retire after age 55. But anyway, if your fire number, let's say, is 2.5 million, then adding 2 years of emergency expenses will be $200,000 in a bear market fund. And that's going to be a total of 2.7 million. And if you calculate 200,000 divided by 2.7 million, that's going to be only 7.4% of your portfolio sitting in cash or cash equivalent assets. If you're worried about your cash allocation being too low, then consider going to 10% or 270,000. It's completely up to your risk tolerance. And what if your fire number was $5 million or more, or maybe $10 million? 10% of $5 million will be $500,000 in cash. This is where you're going to have to debate with yourself if 10% is too much or if $500,000 is good enough. Any way you look at it, that's a lot of cash, right? But you have to remember that the portfolio size is much bigger. And regardless of the fire number, you have to pay attention to your annual expenses. Your expenses will increase every year with inflation, but not every expense item will increase at the same rate. And let's just focus on one portfolio at this moment. You can do what's called a systematic withdrawal strategy, where you only withdraw the income like dividends or interest from your portfolio. Your principal will always remain intact. So you're preventing your investments from ever running out of money. The second withdrawal strategy is the fixed dollar withdrawal strategy. So this is more of a predictive amount where you withdraw the same amount of money out of your investment account every year for a set time. Then you just reassess every year based on your budget. And this method is much easier to manage, and you don't need to consistently adjust your withdrawal amounts. But the downside of doing this fixed dollar strategy is that you're exposed to the risk of inflation, right? And the third strategy is a fixed percentage withdrawal strategy. You just withdraw a fixed percentage of your investment portfolio every year, regardless of how the market performs. It's easy to understand and implement because you're sticking to the withdrawal strategy. However, it can be very difficult to make financial plans because your income fluctuates every year. And there's also a risk of you outliving your investment portfolio. And the fourth strategy is the bucket withdrawal strategy. And you have a bucket that pays for your living expenses. The second bucket pays you in capital gains, and the third bucket in tax-free income. And there are other bucket strategies like using cash, fixed income securities, and equities, but I'm going to stick to the investment vehicles instead. So let me show you how it generally works. Let's say you are single and you want to take out $120,000 a year in retirement. If you took out all $120,000 from your traditional 401k, then your marginal tax rate is at 24%. So in order to save some taxes, perhaps you can take $50,000 out of your traditional 401k and $50,000 from your taxable brokerage account and $20,000 from Roth IRA, because that $50,000 from your traditional 401k will be taxed at 12% marginal tax rate as a single individual. And that $50,000 from your taxable brokerage account will be taxed at 15% long-term capital gains tax rate. And the remaining $20,000 from your Roth IRA will be completely tax-free. The downside of doing this strategy is that it can be very time-consuming, but it may be worth it if you're trying to reduce your tax liabilities throughout your retirement. And for the systematic withdrawal strategy, you're only living on the interest, earnings, and dividends you earn from your portfolio. You're going to keep your principal intact to prevent your portfolio from going to zero, right? So if your investment is in some type of fixed income portfolio that pays you 3 to 4% in dividend income every year, that $1 million would pay you $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And I'll just say 4% in this scenario here. This approach is pretty simple to understand because you're just living on your dividend income or interest that you earn. So your investment is most likely going to have a high yield but lower growth. But this approach may not give you the same income every year, depending on the market performance. If the market does poorly, then your income may be reduced to whatever the market does that year, right? And having that fixed income is going to get outpaced by inflation eventually. And your portfolio is not likely not going to grow as much if you have a fixed income investment. So keep that in mind. So let's do some demonstration with the remaining two withdrawal strategies. So let's say I retired at the end of 2014, and all of these numbers are based on the real S&P 500 historical returns. And I'm going to use the 4% withdrawal rate or the fixed percentage withdrawal strategy. So that 4% will come out of the beginning or the beginning balance of this portfolio every year. The first year will just be the $40,000, right? But because 2015 was a negative year at negative 1.07%, my retirement income would be reduced to about $38,000 in the following year because the portfolio shrunk to $949,000, right? And when the market recovered the following year with a 10.37% return in 2016, then my income went back up to $40,000 because the portfolio recovered from the loss and some more. If your expenses went up, you might lose out on some inflation because your income stayed at $40,000 or less for 3 years during your retirement. And when the market did really well with a 20% return in 2017, my income in 2018 also went up to $46,000. And again, when the market went down by 6%, my income went down back down to 41%. Do you see the trend? You're depending entirely on the market performances. And this is assuming that you have 100% allocated to stocks and no bonds. But we have some bull market years from 2019 to 2021. Your income will also go up. You see how there's the big jump from 41,000 to 51,000, right? And when a bear market happened in 2022 with an 18% negative return, your income decreased from 69,000 to 54,000. So it's important that you manage your expenses every year. They will go up with inflation every year, but your investment portfolio using a fixed percentage withdrawal strategy will make your income fluctuate. As your portfolio grows, your income should grow too, but it will depend on how the market performs every year. And what if you did the fixed dollar withdrawal strategy? Your first year is still going to be $40,000 from the $1 million portfolio. Without any inflation adjustment, your portfolio would still increase from 2014 to 2024 from 1 million to 1.7 million. But that's not necessarily ideal because your expenses have likely gone up from 2014 to 2024, right? The inflation rate is right here, all of these blocks. That's the end of year average. So I just put the inflation rate in the following year. These percentages are the annual average percentage from the CPIU. So you can go to the inflation calculator website to check it out yourself. Inflation has been at an average of 2% annually. It wasn't until 2021 and 2022 when we saw a 4.7% increase on average and 8% increase on average in 2022. The income in 2022 and 2023 would have been nerve-wracking because not only the inflation rate was so much higher than the average, but the S&P 500 also finished the year with a negative 18% return. And in this case, losing about $300,000 in portfolio value, that would have made me or anyone nervous, right? So your portfolio does a little better with the fixed dollar withdrawal strategy, but your income is much less during those high inflation years. The fixed percentage withdrawal strategy would have given you about $55,000 in income because it just follows the market performance. And most of you watching this are still in the accumulation phase or actively investing in your portfolios. But it's important that you understand why you're investing in multiple portfolios. You shouldn't just do the 401k, but open up a Roth IRA, HSA, and taxable brokerage account. What I just showed you did not include any tax calculations. With a taxable brokerage account, you need to know what your long-term capital gains tax rates will be. If you're looking to retire at the age of 55, then your traditional 401k will be taxed as federal income tax. When it comes to any investment withdrawals, you need to keep both inflation and taxes in mind. Taking out $100,000 from a 401k may not be as tax efficient as taking out $100,000 from a taxable brokerage account, right? You can download some of the spreadsheets I just showed you throughout this video for free by visiting firesightchat.com/resources. But most of them are only for the private course members. You can also schedule a session with me to talk about your financial independence strategy by visiting firesightchat.com/consultation. And this has been another beast of a video, and I hope you got a lot out of it.